Hello, everyone. I'm Eric Gibbs with Gambling News. I'm here with Rory Kimber, the Account Management and Marketing Director for 1x2 Networks. And Rory comes with a litany of background in the gaming network, the industry. He has been with Paddy Power. He was there when it merged with Betfair. Also with Sky Vegas when it merged with Poker Stars. With Red Tiger when it merged with NetEnt. And then with NetEnt when it went through several mergers. So he definitely has a background and interest in the gaming industry, now serving 1x2 Networks, an independent software company based in the UK that has been the pioneer of several gaming solutions since 2002. 1x2 Networks is a pioneer of HTML5 content development, offering a variety of sports games, table games, and slots. And HTML5, for those that aren't aware, is the primary content being used today to facilitate the introduction of gaming solutions for any platform, whether it be mobile, PC, what have you. It allows the content to be developed seamlessly so that it can be viewed on different platforms without having to develop multiple content types. So, Rory, thank you for joining us today. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, really looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure to speak with those that are helping innovate in the industry, and 1x2 Network is certainly among that. And with your background, you are definitely helping drive the next era of gaming for the world. So this is definitely
trying to at least, yeah.
Well, you're in a good spot, and I know that you have a lot to offer, both you personally and 1x2 Networks. So this is a great time to be involved in the iGaming industry and witness what's happening. Now, you grew up around gaming ever since you could probably remember. You lived in the Isle of Man, you lived in Malta and Gibraltar. What continues to attract you most to the gaming industry?
Yeah, as you said, it was something that was part of my childhood in a way, which I guess you can't normally say. In terms of other people normally have to wait until they're 18, but yeah, there was a lot of it around growing up on the Isle of Man, and the other places you mentioned as well kind of reflect that as in the same way. I think for me, what attracted me at the start was the fast-paced and the commerciality of the whole thing. That makes a lot of sense to me, that everyone's working towards the bottom line, and even the parts of the industry like marketing, where it's slightly more intangible and difficult to trace that through, there's still a lot of questions about return on investment and that sort of things, and it felt quite logical going through it. I think the one thing as well that gaming has, or that I've enjoyed in gaming, is the two sides of it. So operator stuff, where I feel like in the operator world, success is maybe slightly easier to measure. And I really enjoyed that, especially at the start of my career, to be able to go through at the more junior roles in particular, and be able to see when you're making a difference, because the numbers come through in a sort of clearer way. Right. And then moving to B2B, I think there's a lot that you kind of go in little sprints, I feel. So B2B, it's slightly more difficult to know how you're doing until something goes really right, and then you see the hard work from the previous months and years sort of pay off. And B2B is where I've spent the last few years now, and that it is a small industry. There's not that many people working in online B2B gaming, and so getting to know the big players in that, people that I've worked with or alongside for a long time, and being able to take their advice and yeah, I think build relationships with the kind of people that are making those decisions has been a part of it for me. And there is always something new going on, but it always seems to be the same faces that are doing that. And that's what really interests me. And I guess there's the travel element that we haven't been able to enjoy for the last however many months and years now. But yeah, you mentioned Malta, Gibraltar, places like that. There aren't many industries where I'd have got the opportunity to go and live out in the sun for a little while.
I think you found the right industry to be in, especially for those that enjoy travel and enjoy something that is always changing, because this industry definitely never stops developing on multiple fronts: the marketing side, the gaming side, regulatory side, most of
Absolutely.
all. There's always something going on. And in fact, just to interject real quick, you may have seen already that Betfair is deciding to not deal with the Netherlands with its new iGaming regime that's coming into effect at the end of next month. They have announced that they're pulling out. Their last day will be September 30th, one day before the start of the new gambling regulations coming into force. And I think that they chose that day intentionally as a way to say, we're not happy with the way things are going. And this is indicative of how quickly things do change in the industry. Betfair was all ready to go and was viewing the Dutch market as a possible really good source of revenue, but now looking at how things have changed in the past 4 months with the regulations and how the new Gambling Act is being adopted, they've decided to jump back. And then I think we might see some other operators do the same thing. It's just a very fluid global market right now.
Yeah, it's a very fine line, I think, from a regulatory perspective. And we've seen markets that perhaps, and it's not really my place to say what regulation goes too far and what doesn't, but in my view, if regulation leads to a prospering black market in that country, then perhaps it's a negative more than a positive in certain aspects. So if you look at Germany, for example, probably the harshest regulations they've come in. Well, the players are now dealing with RTPs on games that are sometimes in the 80s because of the turnover tax. That doesn't seem a positive experience for the player. And also, there is a lot of growth that you see or at least hear about in black market Germany, at which point the people that, the reason we're doing all this for responsible gambling, for anti-money laundering, etc., if there's a big enough black market, then those things can still be responsible gambling so difficult to pick up. So the Betfair decision on the Netherlands perhaps indicates that they think that the Dutch regulations just tipped over the edge and it's not worth it for them, which I guess, yeah, as you say, it will be interesting to see who follows suit on that. But if a certain amount of people do, I guess it needs to be relooked at.
That is kind of a lead into my next question, which was, the one biggest change that's been seen in the iGaming ecosystem over the past couple of years. And I think a lot of that does center on the regulations. As you mentioned, Germany and now the Netherlands, even the UK. In many instances, I believe that the goal is not being met by the actions. And I think that they will lead to bigger black markets. The only way to truly combat money laundering and things like that is by offering a regulated open market that is user friendly. And user is both the operator and the ultimate consumer, right? It's not just the end user.
That's the point, right? It's got to be operator friendly enough for them to be in the market. Otherwise, you just get scooped up by .coms, and there is no point of having regulation. And of course, from a government perspective, then there's tax implications, and they don't get the funding by taxing the legitimate operators if they're not in the market. At which point, they can't support the side of responsible gambling and regulations that they need to. So
exactly,
I completely agree. Yeah, and as you say, like we sort of touched on the biggest change, and I think you'd be hard pressed to find someone that doesn't answer that question with the word regulation in there somewhere. It's something that we're constantly jumping through the hoops of, and in a lot of positive ways as well. I mean, you look at the UK, like you mentioned, obviously it's a much more mature market probably than anywhere else in the world, barring a couple of exceptions. But it's kind of getting itself into a place that seems quite logical with the steps it's taking forward. I think there's probably some credit there to go to the BGC in terms of the operators trying to lead that, because that at least means that they're at the table to have discussions on where we're going on it. But for some of the markets that are coming in now, it feels like they aren't necessarily learning the lessons of places that have been there ahead of them and done that to different extents in different areas. But yeah, I'm more surprised than ever that all these regulations seem to be different country by country. You'd have thought if you're the 10th, 15th, whatever number market to go fully regulated within Europe, that there would have been a kind of general consensus on the best way to do that by now, but that doesn't seem to be the case.
No, I mean, I know they've been working on it for the past couple of years, they being some industry insiders. There hasn't been a widespread collaborative effort so far. It would be nice to see that. I mean, there are, and it would help possibly shape how the US develops its rules as well. Because there are, as you know, so many different regulations and structures that everyone has to follow that it's easy to see where confusion and errors could come in, which would cause frustration, money loss, and ultimately lead to some operators deciding to step away. Now, speaking of that, the different regulations in various countries, 1x2 was just licensed recently by the Hellenic Gaming Commission. A new area, new regulations. How difficult was it for the company to get involved, and how thorough was the process?
Yeah, as you say, granted the license within the last couple of weeks, and it's an interesting one, really. To an extent, we're kind of used to it now, having done it a few times already in different markets, so we are more adaptable and able to kind of jump through the hoops. But with Greece itself, the process, there was some confusion, particularly on the date that the market was going to transition, which obviously makes it difficult from a planning situation to put in the technical regulations that you need, because you know, there aren't a big list of operators who want to adhere to the regulations before they come into law, especially some of the ones that are slightly more stringent. So there was confusion on that. I guess an example of something that we weren't expecting was the fact that we had to be ISO certified within 6 months of the market changing. And that was, fortunately for us, in our plans anyway, to allow access into different markets such as Switzerland. So we were able to kind of just expedite that process slightly, but that additional step, I think, will probably be difficult for anyone that wasn't planning to do ISO certification. It's a big process to do that we're in the middle of now, but 6 months sounds a long time, but it isn't necessarily, when there's lots of things that need to be sorted out for that, and it's not easy in times of COVID and people working from home, etc. So things like that made it more difficult, but all new markets are challenging, right? And that's part of the fun in certain ways, although it doesn't feel like it at times. And I guess we're lucky in the respect that we've historically been very strong in that region. Some of our oldest and most successful partners work in the Greek market. And so both our historical and our new games are good there. And so I think now we're ready. We're kind of stealing market share a little bit, which makes up for the tax implications that are there. So we've broken out all right with it, but it wasn't necessarily an easy process. And I don't think it's finished yet. There doesn't seem to be a consensus on what the RTP strategy is going to be in Greece yet. There doesn't seem to be sort of a definitive operator consensus on exactly how they're going to deal with certain bits of it. So whilst it's looking okay for now, I guess you never know where we're going to be in 3, 6, 9 months from now in Greece.
I think that's pretty much par for the course everywhere, and not just 6 months from now, but even 5 years from now. You know, there are so many changes going on. So speaking of that, where do you see the company 5 years from now?
I think one of the, as you mentioned at the very top, 1x2 has been around since 2002. So we've been through so many different iterations of the company, different lead products. We've had virtuals leading the way for us for a long time. There's been an aggregation side of the business that's recently been growing after many years of being in a successful part, but not necessarily the whole massive revenue earner for us. It's been a kind of side element that's coming into us. We've had the slots, we've had just standard slots. We spent a period with 3x3 being a lead product, and now Megaways, in particular our branded Megaways product. So where we're going to be in 5 years, I'm tempted to kind of say your guess is as good as mine, but I think maybe a bit more of an honest answer would be that we'll be going through the kind of things that everyone does with more branded products. That's our kind of flagship product. And so bringing branded into different types of games, whether that be cluster games, book of games, multiplayer games, crash games, those last two in particular being products that we're quite far into development of. That's my best bet. But at the same time, I'm not sure. I guess it will also be about taking all those things that I've just mentioned into all the different markets, every regulated market. And in 5 years' time, there's going to be an awful lot more of those. So making sure that everything, all our revenue streams are available and regulated properly is a key part of it. And there's going to be a lot of work to get there, but I think we're in a good position to achieve that.
I'm sure you are. 1x2 has come a long way and has more experience than most in the industry, so it knows how to innovate and stay on top of the changes and the challenges. A question I like to ask of everyone I speak with, and it's more of an opinion response that I'm after, because no one knows what's going to happen down the road. Where do you personally see the iGaming industry 5 years from now, in the sense of right now, the market share it controls compared to land-based is relatively small, but it has seen huge growth over the past 12, 16, 18 months, partly because of COVID, but that opened everyone's eyes to what was really possible with iGaming. So if we take that and use it to kind of portray how the market might adjust over the next 5-10 years, how much different will the market look 5 years from now?
Yeah, I'm glad you just asked for an opinion on this one, because I definitely don't think there's a right answer. But
that's true.
I think, look, we talked about the regulations, and I think they'll settle a little bit. I think that someone will go over the top too far, and maybe we've already seen that, and have to drag them back, and places will hopefully get a little bit more astute in the way they implement their first set of regs. I think there's a lot of difference that we have to look at in terms of markets, of course, and I think that's going to lead to a lot more market-specific content. A lot of suppliers, including ourselves, talk about market-specific content a lot, and that's part of all the development processes. But I still don't think there are people out there that really are building 5 different games a month with a different continent in mind for each one of those. I think there's a sort of a nod of the head towards whether this game will work in LATAM or Asia or North America or wherever that may be, as opposed to really truly going, right, this game we might not even release in Europe because it's so far away from what they want. So I think that's probably something we're going to see develop. I guess also we're probably going to, from a content perspective, see the next big thing, Megaways having dominated for so long now. But what will that be? We have some ideas that I can't necessarily tell you yet. And if we're right, then I think life becomes slightly easier. But who knows is the real answer. There's going to be a lot of people, and there already are a lot of people trying to find that. I think the big one, obviously, is the USA opening up. And that domination, you look at culture in everything outside of gambling, films being an example, I guess, USA led in a worldwide sense. So once more states open up and legalize, the amount of moves the big companies out there are already making with big European or worldwide operators, you look at Bally's and Gamesys, for example, I can see that trend massively continuing, at which point you've got massive companies that have got enormous checkbooks in the driving seat of an industry that they've only been involved in for 5 years. So I think that kind of Americanization of everything is an inevitability. It's just how much they end up filtering down to the day-to-day operations of these operations, or whether they're just the people behind it all. And then from a tech perspective, there's a load of stuff going on, right? AI is going to play a big role. We've got some ideas for that in terms of how it affects our mathematics, how it affects our content production. But will there be a switch over to virtual reality at some point? It's one of those things that's been talked about for 10 years already. So are we still going to be talking about that in 5-10 years time? I don't know. It's a possibility we are, but there's also just as likely a chance that VR suddenly takes the world by storm in the next 2 years, and suddenly the games we now play on our mobiles or desktops are pretty much defunct because the experience one step on is so much more immersive and innovative. I think there's going to be a lot of changes, but I guess my best bet would be on the Americanization point of things, and how the huge operators what we currently see as huge operators just become a division of some of these multi-billion-pound organizations in the States.
I would have to agree with you. I mean, you're looking at some of the larger casino companies, MGM, Caesars, getting involved heavily into iGaming now. And of course, as most older executives would do, they are still working off the mindset of land-based casinos. You know, they're working off of 60, 70 years of physical retail casinos, and now within just the past 2 or 3 years are trying to become more diverse and embrace iGaming, but they don't necessarily yet have that mindset. Once that clicks, I think we will see a rapid shift, a larger shift. As you mentioned, there is a lot going into AI and virtual reality innovation right now. It's a logical step. HTML5 does a wonderful job at allowing developers to produce content, but I think we will see more AI and VR solutions in the pipeline coming down, especially as the market share for iGaming does continue to increase over the next several years. It's an inevitability that iGaming takes a larger piece of the action.
I think you look at the States, when you talk the likes of Caesars, etc., and when they kind of start putting more they're obviously focusing on iGaming, but when that starts to sort of even overtake their retail focus, well, I guess they're bottom line driven as much as everyone else is, right? And so the more states that open up, the more revenue they're going to make from online stuff, and suddenly, as it becomes a larger percentage of their business, more resource gets allocated to it, and it becomes a self-fulfilling thing. Exactly. But I kind of agree with you. I don't know how quickly that's going to happen, because the land-based sector is so profitable for them that there's a big hill to climb before we're seen as the lead product. But looking forward to that day.
Without a doubt. I mean, you look at Resorts World Las Vegas, $5 billion into a brand new casino in Vegas. That's not something you walk away from, No. And there are so many land-based casino operators that have so much invested into the tangible assets that it's not something that they would be willing to shift away from overnight. However, look at what MGM's doing. They've already said, basically, Vegas is out. We're not so much interested there anymore. We're going to concentrate more on iGaming. Las Vegas Sands is going B2B for iGaming. So, they are realizing that the future, at least some of them are realizing that the future is in iGaming. Like in the industry, though, it's not an overnight switch. It's going to take some time. And of course, 1x2 is going to be at the forefront of all of the development, giving their content to all of the operators that make the switch, which is a lead into the next question. What is 1x2 doing to maintain its competitive edge as the industry continues to progress?
Yeah, obviously we're trying to fight a battle on many fronts in that respect, but I guess one of the things that we have as kind of key to our strategy is the old cliche that content is king. And so the best way to keep maintaining our competitive edge, as you put it, is to produce the best stuff that we possibly can. We've going down different routes. There's a lot of content that's been successful recently that we you know, we're still yet to come out with our first hold and win game. We haven't produced a cluster game, but both of those are in the very near future. What we're hoping to achieve, I think, with that is a bit of sort of second mover advantage and pick up on the lessons that we can see from other people's content, and make sure that when we do come to the floor with it, which, as I say, is very soon, we're coming out with a sort of fully formed product, and perhaps let other people learn some of the lessons for us. That's not always going to be our strategy with stuff. If we think we're on the cutting edge of things, we definitely take the plunge. But on this case, we're coming into that one in the timelines that we are. Part of 1x2, as I kind of have spoken about, is the fact that we do so many different things. And I guess what we try and do is be all things to all people in a way that they need. So, you know, mention the aggregation, we've got our own stuff, we've got our branded products, etc. There's definitely big operators out there that we can combine those things for. So they have our branded megaways, they don't have that much of our content, but then they have the aggregation side, or they don't want the branded products, but they do want some of our other content and a specific couple of suppliers that we aggregate. So it's about making those bespoke packages that work best for the operator. And I think one thing that 1x2 does really well is the old relationships that we've kept for many, many years. And it's one of the positives of having been around so long and having hired people that have got experience in the industry. And we try and build that trust up in a way that means we can work hand in hand with operators in a way that perhaps some of the newer game studios can't do, because it takes a long time to build up those relationships. And so
Sure.
there have been times where, as everyone has in the past, perhaps we've been guilty of overselling some products that didn't perform as much as we promised. It's always tempting to tell everyone that what you've got coming up next month is the next big thing, but we're really making a conscious effort to sell the right games to the right people, and then they can look at the performance of those games and trust us that next time we tell them something's going to really hit hard, then it will, and so that they're willing to give it the support that it needs. Lastly, really, I'll talk about the kind of versatility and adaptability that we have. All those new markets that we've briefly touched on, we've been in day one. We're always ready with the new market stuff. Occasionally it's taken some sleepless nights, particularly on the development side, and I guess they deserve a lot of credit for that. But we're ready to adapt. We're ready to move really quickly to the regulations and also the trends that happen in the industry. We've seen things that come in and die out a year later. It's about making sure that you're on board that train as it's still moving forward, I think. And so whatever the next big thing comes along in the world of content, we're keen to make sure that we are there as quickly as possible, or hopefully even developing it ourselves. And it's in that kind of respect that we've kind of developed these two work streams. We have a content team that develops our sort of year ahead roadmap and focuses on what we know, iterating that, making it as strong as possible, both in front end and back end, and building our new framework to build the slots on, etc. But we also have an innovation team whose job is to be coming up with new stuff, or if we think someone else has put something out in the market that we could benefit from releasing, getting that out as quickly as possible. So that's something that we've newly implemented to try and make sure that we're not missing out by having a 9-month development roadmap. And by the time that we're there with the game, the best of it's already happened. So I guess it's a combination of all those things, but having specific resource for innovation is key for me. And we've seen it since the very start of the industry. Every couple of years, something comes along that blows everyone's socks off, and having a specific team of people with a big empty whiteboard that are trying to create that gives us the best chance possible of being the next person to come up with mega ways or whatever that may be.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, 1x2, 20 years in the industry, and you have to remain fluid to be able to brag of being able to stay alive for so long. You know that from witnessing all of the mergers across your professional experience.
Yeah.
A lot of companies don't survive even for 5 or 6 years. And so to be able to come back and say, hey, we're still here 20 years later, we're still innovating, we're still growing, it speaks a lot about the company's culture and what it's doing to help shape the future of iGaming. So 1x2 definitely has found the recipe for success, and I know that we'll be seeing a lot more out of them moving forward. Is there one particular market that other than the US, the obvious North American market, that is piquing 1x2's interest right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've probably covered the US, but yeah, it goes without saying really that that's the obvious answer to that question. I think the answer really then, with that excluded, would be Latin America. It's an interesting one because my opinion of that is that perhaps people are already making a mistake referring to that as a new market as Latin America. We wouldn't go and really talk about Europe as a market. We talk about the UK, Sweden, Germany, Italy, Spain, etc. And so it feels quite Europe-centric to just refer to that region as a whole. I think you've got to look at you look at Brazil when that regulates, which, I believe it will in the relatively near future. The amount of people that live there, the love for gambling in that area of the world, and Brazil in particular, it would be foolish to lump that in with the likes of Peru or Argentina that have very different tastes. But, to look at a region itself, Latin America, I think, is the one that is really interesting because it's maturing from a fairly immature market, but it's doing it at quite a pace. And so to get out there, to understand it, to know what the preferences are, which I think are very different to what we have closer to home, I think is going to be key. And therefore, and it's probably a really good example of where we need regional specific content, but really quite specific. Sure. And that, you look at Argentina regulating in a region by region way, Buenos Aires City being different. There's going to be a lot of different hoops to jump through, but I think people that do that and back themselves in that area and are willing to learn, willing to get things wrong a little bit, and adapt from there, I think that will really pay off. So that's something that we want to do. I also think it's important to get some boots on the ground out there and really kind of live and breathe that market. But obviously with COVID, that's been a little bit different, and I'm not sure I'm going to get sign off for a nice trip out to South America anytime soon. But I'm hopeful. Maybe this is a message directed to my boss to put me a plane ticket as soon as we can. I don't know. I just fancy a bit of a holiday.
I think it's a requirement. 1x2 brass listening to this podcast. Rory needs a trip to South America.
By myself as well. I don't need anyone. Coming with me. It'll be absolutely fine.
That's right. It's a solo gig. Privacy concerns. The operators don't want to speak with anyone but Rory. And
it's a trust issue. Exactly. Yeah.
That's right. As you said, Brazil is going to be a huge market when it comes back to life. Colombia, Argentina, there's a lot going on throughout the entire region. And they all need to get in touch with Rory to help them develop content and get started. So keep that in mind. Rory, I appreciate your time today. I don't have any other questions for you, but I'm more than willing to give you a couple of minutes to add any other details you'd like to spread.
Yeah, I mean, I guess just to kind of close it off, and thanks for your time as well. Of course, really enjoyed myself. I think the one thing we're really feeling right now is this excitement. It's an interesting time, I think, for the industry coming off COVID and how the numbers spiked, obviously, when everyone had to stay indoors and everyone saw this incredible growth. And we're still growing at quite a rate, but it feels interesting to look at numbers that aren't as big in the growth as what we're hitting, and remind ourselves that those kind of figures are still exceptional growth numbers. But the excitement we're feeling with the new products, I mean, the book of Branded that we've got to come off the back of Branded Megaways is such an exciting product, and we've seen such interest from massive operators that it's something that we're kind of letting ourselves get swept up in a little bit, and we're really excited about that. So it's something overall that we want to be able to push. We're looking forward to things like ICE coming back, and Sigma, and hopefully IGB or G2E in Vegas, and to be able to talk to people face to face about all those things, and share industry news and have a beer and all those kind of things. And yeah, and I guess the only other thing I'd say is we've mentioned so many of the mergers and acquisitions that I've been involved with. It would probably be remiss of me to not mention that I didn't have, I'm more of a lucky charm than someone that works in mergers and acquisitions. So I don't want people that actually did the hard work on those things to see this and think that I'm claiming any credit for those. But it's been quite the ride for me personally and for 1x2 over the time. And it feels like, despite the long period 1x2 has been around, that we're just getting started. So yeah, I guess continue to watch this space.
Definitely, and it's going to be very interesting to see how 1x2 grows and expands throughout the world as the iGaming industry continues to evolve. So, Rory, I really appreciate your time. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. Definitely need to have you back in another 7-8 months after you're done with your Latin American excursion.
Yes,
because
absolutely.
you know your
Well,
bosses
hopefully
are going
we
to
can.
sign off on it.
Yeah, well, definitely now. Yeah, I mean, at that time as well, we'll be just about to go into the States properly, I guess, at that point with our content.
Good.
And so that'd be a great time to come and talk to you about all the plans.
Definitely. We would definitely love to have you back. So, Rory, I appreciate it once again. I hope you have a wonderful weekend, and we will definitely be in touch.
Thanks. Good to speak to you.
Likewise. Take care.